right, hello everybody. We're gonna check real quick, make sure we're live. We're gonna be doing some live testing. You know how I like to do it, live tests, and then you know that there's no tricks. So let's see, make sure that we are working here. So what happened was I received a customer review. Let's see, make sure we're, sorry, gotta check the sound here. Make sure we're actually getting live sound. Okay, we have sound. Excellent. Okay, so let me give you a little backstory here. We received a 1-star review from a customer, and the customer stated that they'd went to a bunch of different steps, including putting the wick in, making sure it had soaked for a good long period of time, and then a wick went up like a match. So if you'll remember from our last test, we have this one here, which is a highly improvised lamp. Now, the only problem with this one is putting it through the washer curls the wick up into a circle, and apparently that is very effective for making very large flame, which is why if you look at like a kerosene heater, they use a circular wick, which is highly effective. So first things first, before we do any testing, we have 2 fire extinguishers right here. You can clearly see them. So this is the one we already had going. We're going to see if this will still work. So the upper problem with this one is it made a pretty big flame for how little wick is showing. And I'll attribute that to the fact that, one, you have this stainless steel getting very warm and evaporating fuel very efficiently, and also the curled up shape of the wick is duplicating a kerosene heater essentially. But I'm using Ner Mitzvah pure paraffin lamp oil. There we go right there. I really like this pure paraffin lamp oil. It is excellent. I'm in no way affiliated with Ner Mitzvah, but if they wanted me to write a slogan for them, I would probably say, Ner Mitzvah, a little bit of a miracle in every single bottle. As you can see by our last test, we had this flame burning for almost a half hour, and we still, at the very end of the test, had white wick showing and only a little bit of singeing. A little bit of charred, but you could still actually see essentially unburnt wick after almost a half hour. So we're going to call that incredible. So this one's working. It does not appear to be going up like a match. I'm really starting to get very worried about this review. The other thing is I contacted the customer, and they very enthusiastically told me what fuel they were using. And then I went ahead and went with a different fuel. So maybe the problem was the fuel they were using. That could have been the problem. But more likely, I think, if it was a genuine, true customer experience, I think the thing that they could have done is they did not fill their fuel high enough, set the wick in, assuming that the wick would pull an unlimited number of inches up to the top. Whereas you'll see here, this is an old-fashioned kerosene lantern, and look, I mean, there's no distance between the bottom of this reservoir and the burning tip. And you know why it's designed that way is because wick only pulls a few inches against gravity. That's a little secret there. So let's keep going here. The next step is going to be I'm going to fill this with fuel. And I was really hoping to just do a bunch of Sierra Nevada World Music Festival. Well, first of all, Sierra Nevada World Music Festival is happening June 16th through the 18th. It's going to be a fantastic lineup, and you will play Where's Waldo, and you'll say Where's Dano, and I'll be at the Sierra Nevada World Music Festival. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this up. So I have filled it up to about right here. It's very near the top. So the next thing I will do is So I already have 3/4 flat cotton wick, just like the review. You can see I have almost none showing. Oop, if I could actually do some camera work that was good. So I think we will have about that much wick showing. Now we are going to set this into the fuel. That is now twisted on. So I think what could have happened, we're going to assume this is a genuine, honest review, and that there was no bad intent intended. And the fuel is here, and the burning tip is up here. And I think what happened is they set it in, assuming that everything would be okay, whereas in my experience, the wick must be absolutely wet from the top to the bottom. Just setting it in fuel and thinking that it's going to pull all the way to the top is not a great way to go. So what we're going to do, and here's a little secret, oil lamps take a little bit of work. There's a fantastic blues song done by several blues artists called Keep Your Wicks Trimmed. I think it's Keep Your Wicks Trimmed. And it goes on, keep your wicks trimmed and burning. Anyway, so we're going to, I'll also add that you need to make sure your wick is wet from top to bottom. It's kind of like a water pump, and I have used a water pump on a canal before, and you have to make sure the pump is primed with water because it won't pull air. So I think a wick is very similar in that way. So I've just put a couple drops down. We'll let that soak for a second. And really, I'm literally just dribbling some drops down to make sure it's wet from top to bottom. Okay. We're looking good. So now, the next step, and this is crucial, is this going to go up like a match? And I assume go up like a match means that it's going to, you'll see here, this one is still burning. This one has not gone out like a match. This one here, and it's just a test tube with a washer and a wick. I really like to make simple lamps, and that's the way to go. So here we go. Now remember, this is supposed to go up like a match. Oop, that is already getting hot. Do not put your hands at the top of the chimney. So I think we're going to that wick is now below the height of the globe. We'll give it a little bit more. So what we're looking for is for this to go out within about a minute. So let's see. Oop. Look at that. Okay, so let's put it out. And let's do some testing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this back down in here. And the one thing I want to make sure is that we are wet from top to bottom. Okay. So one thing I'm going to do is grab a little paper towel. I'm going to dry up the spilled fuel. And we will do this again. So I think what I did was I messed up playing around with the wick there while it was going. So we're going to let that get well established before I start playing around with the height there. So what we're going to be observing is, does this go out instantly, or does it hold a flame and continue to wick? You know, I'm almost liking my test tube lamp better than an old-fashioned kerosene lantern. Look how well the same wick with just a washer and a test tube is doing compared with this one. Well, I will say that an old-fashioned oil lantern does not perform as well as just curling up the wick and pulling it through a washer. Look how beautiful the flame of this one curled into a C with less wick showing and just a test tube and a washer versus this one right here. So this one over here had almost no charring, whereas the old-fashioned kerosene style is actually charring, and the wick, we'll say the flame is going down. Isn't that interesting? Let's see how it goes. Could be it takes a second to establish, but I will definitely say a test tube with a washer and a wick pulled through makes a more impressive flame than a design that has been around for hundreds of years, maybe even 1,000 years. If anybody knows who made the first kerosene lantern with this style of look. So yeah, interesting. I will say it's valid. I wouldn't quite say it's burning down like a match, but definitely the quality of the flame is not nearly as good in a old-fashioned kerosene lantern as in this one here. So let's see how this goes. It could be that with this flat style, you have to create kind of like a there's something called char cloth, and char cloth they use in fire starting and like survival situations. It could be that you have to create kind of like a char cloth situation. Interesting. Well, I am baffled here that the same wick in a test tube with a washer is working so much better than a design that you would say was pioneered hundreds of years ago and is a classic design. So the only thing I can think of is that the fuel needs to be to the top, maybe. That would be the next thing I would do as a test. Huh. Well, I'll tell you, the old-fashioned lantern does not work as well as a test tube. That is for sure. All right, well, everybody leave in the comments what you think is going on here. We have a flat cotton 3/4 inch wick curled into a C with a washer as a holder. And then we have a design. I'm not going to say which company this is from, but this is from a major manufacturer. And I'm really kind of in disbelief that my test tube with a washer is making such a nicer flame with the same wick and the same fuel And it's just not working as well in an old-fashioned kerosene lantern. Huh. Well, I'll be. Okay, we'll run the test a little bit longer. I think the last thing I would do is I'm going to maybe put it out and then fill fuel to the top. And it could be that it just never got a good start. I don't even know what to say here because there's about 2 inches between here and the top. Is that maybe 3 or 4 inches between here and here? Huh. I don't even begin to know what to say here. That is so strange, though. I will definitely say a test tube works better than a professionally designed lamp with the same wick. The only difference being this is curled into a C and in a washer, and this is using a standard advancing mechanism that was designed hundreds of years ago. Well, I'll tell you, this one's a puzzler. So it's not going out, but I will definitely say that the flame is not nearly as impressive. And for the amount of wick we have showing here, we should have a much better flame. So maybe if anybody could leave in the comments, I'm no expert, but I have done a ton of testing, and I'll tell you what's funny is these little improvised lamps appear to work better than professionally store-bought kerosene lantern, which I just can't even begin to wrap my head around. Interesting. See, this thing is going to be super hot. I need to get myself a... So what we're going to do is we're going to put that out. And maybe what we'll do is we'll trim and see what we can do. All right, so after using this for even just a short period of time, this glass is going to be incredibly hot. And let's see, probably need to, oops. Let me go ahead and drop a little fuel down there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off the burnt part. So what's the lesson so far? Make your own lamps and don't buy store-bought stuff. I can't even begin to figure out how my little test tube is working so much better. That is just kind of baffling. But this is why we do testing. We don't pull any punches. We are definitely experiencing something like what the customer talked about. So my first recommendation is throw away your oil lantern and get some test tubes. Which, of course, wouldn't really work very well. But anyway, let's... We're going to fill this clear to the top. And let's see if it was an issue of, in this store-bought lantern, there's so much distance between the burning tip and even the beginning of the reservoir. But gosh, look how good the test tube lamp is working. This thing is just flawless, and then this one is just not... the opposite of not flawless. Okay, that's cooled down enough. Okay, So now we know for sure this is wet top to bottom. And let's see what happens. So let's see, we'll start real small. And let's see if this flame will die down or not. So right now it's just burning off excess fuel. So hopefully that will get this metal part good and hot to help with evaporation. Part of what the flame arrestor does is provide an incredibly hot area for having a lot of evaporation. So the flame front has spread clear across. And I'll tell you for sure, this one is still, I can see a little bit of white fibers inside of the black charred, whereas this one has already fully charred. It's amazing how much better at efficiency this design, where it's curled into a C and you're using a washer and just a test tube, versus a professionally designed lamp, which you would think should be perfect. With the same wick, we're using 3/4 flat cotton on both of these. Although I'll tell you now, the flame is looking a lot better, isn't it? So what did I do? I made sure our fuel was up near the top. I also poured a ton of fuel directly down through the wick, making sure the wick is absolutely soaked. And I'll tell you, this is looking a lot better, isn't it? So what have we done that between this test and the last test? It could be that now this part right here is good and hot, and now is acting as a fantastic evaporation tool. Because anybody who's used like a camping stove knows that the first step on a lot of camping stoves is you kind of turn on the fuel and make a little puddle of fuel at the top of the stove. You turn the fuel back off, you light that on fire, and that fire kind of warms up all the parts of the stove so that the stove can evaporate more efficiently. Okay, so we were definitely, step one, we were able to duplicate what the customer said, I think. I think the issues were either we didn't have a fuel level high enough, or the wick was not soaked through properly, or it could also be that for this to work very well, just a few tips of the wick need to be showing, and you also need to have a very warm flame arrestor, because this is working beautifully and not going out like a match at all. So I think now we have success. I'd call this good. This looks good. Interesting. Okay, so we will say we were able to duplicate the customer issue. I can say that was definitely authentic and genuine because I was having the same issue. However, once I filled the fuel to the very top, I made sure I dribbled a bunch of fuel down the top so that the wick is absolutely wet top to bottom. And now, I mean, this is working. It's not going out like a match at all. Probably going to mess it up by jostling it. But it's making a good flame front. I don't have any complaints here. We can see if we can mess it up by advancing the flame. You want to see if we can mess up? We have a good, let's go another minute to show that we definitely have good flame. Although I'll still say my test tube is doing better than this professional store-bought lantern. Only problem being the test tube's not nearly as safe, and you'd have to walk around with a test tube holder, which I would call this just purely for testing purposes. It's not safe to actually make a lamp like this and use it on a regular basis. So don't try this at home. I'm a professional. Right. Okay, so I think this has been going long enough that we can say this is not going out like a match. We still have good flame production. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. So I've turned it up a little bit. Let's see if this will now go out like a match. No, we're still getting pretty good flame. Not as good a flame as my test tube lamp here, but we are still getting plenty of good flame. Now, I will say, a test tube lamp with your wick curled into a little C shape and pulled through a metal washer is fantastic. This thing is a champ. It's still using the same wick. I didn't trim it. All I did was prime it. So I think we'll let this go a little bit longer because why not? But we appear to be working. It's not going out like a match. And I'm curious how long it'll be able to make a flame front without having any wick advanced. So I think at some point on our test tube lamp, we are going to reach the point where we've reached maximum amount of distance between the fuel level and the burning tip. So far we're looking real good, but we are already almost halfway down the test tube here. And I have to imagine at some point we're going to reach the part where fuel can no longer be pulled against gravity. We're looking pretty good here, though. Let me open the window. All right, once we get this done, we can start getting back to our regular Sierra Nevada World Music Festival programming. I'm almost ready to start talking about Soul Syndicate. I've had a lot of fun looking through many videos that are on YouTube. There's a extensive collection of their work available on YouTube if you want to go check out Soul Syndicate. Yeah, I mean, it's really not going out like a match now. So I will agree with the customer review that if not set up properly, the kerosene lantern definitely will go out like a match. Whereas a much simpler design is seeming to do so much better. The wick looks beautiful over here, and the flame has not gone down at all. The only thing that's gone down is the fuel level. We're now down to the fuel level right about here. And we're still looking pretty good on the lantern. That would definitely be enough flame to make a certain amount of light. I mean, these only put out so much light, but it is holding flame. Yeah, I really don't know what to say here. So the steps I took, I filled the fuel to the top. I made sure the wick was primed top to bottom. And the other thing is I only had a little sliver of wick showing here. Gosh, I'm almost wondering if the variable is this flame arrestor has to be warmed up substantially before it starts working as well. Because part of the job of the flame arrestor is to help evaporate fuel and to control the flame. You can see here a metal washer is working beautifully. Yeah, Well, it hasn't gone out like a match. We were able to get it to go out like a match in the first shot, and still not 100% sure what was wrong. My theories are the flame arrestor wasn't warm enough, and my other theory was did not actually have a completely wet wick, because the flat cotton wick is pretty thick, and maybe it takes quite a few drops to go down and soak it from the inside out. But we're definitely not going out like a match. So when properly set up, the wick can work. I was able to duplicate initial issues. Leave in the comment if you have any theories as to what was wrong. I'm sure many of you out there are much better experts than I am at kerosene lanterns. I seem to do much better with highly improvised lamps. So this is good. I mean, we have not gone out. Wonder if I can figure out how many. It doesn't tell me how many minutes we've been going. Huh. Hi, this is Daniel. Hey, how you doing? All right, we're still rolling here. All right, it's still going. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. So what can we say? If properly primed and set up, the wick does work. And whatever I was doing at first was not the right thing. And the only variables I can think of is that I hadn't properly wet the wick from top to bottom, or the fuel level was too low, or it's really key that this flame arrestor gets good and hot, and then you get proper evaporation of the fuel. But we're still burning. So we're 34 minutes in, and it's still on fire. This test probably a good 10 or 15 minutes so far. So please leave in the comments what you think I could have been doing wrong in the first part, and what have we done different that we're doing right in the second part, because now it is working very well. And I can't really say what was wrong to begin with. So this is kind of baffling. We'll wrap up the test in a little bit, but well, the good news is I was able to duplicate the customer experience, because when I did my first test, this one works perfectly. I can't believe actually how well a test tube with a washer and a wick pulled through works, compared with a professional store-bought lantern, which appears to not work nearly as well. So that's why we do testing. It's amazing, though. I mean, this design has been perfected over, it's at least a couple hundred years, right? Maybe even more. And my test tube lamp is blowing it out of the water. So we got that going for us. All right, I think we're getting close to where we can just wrap this up. I was really worried at first that we had a problem, that it was not a genuine review, but now looking at this test, I think we definitely had a genuine review, and I experienced the same issue as a customer, and something we've done has fixed it. And so please leave in the comments which of the items you think were the most important. Was it the fact that I filled the fuel to the top? Was it the fact that I made sure the wick was wet top to bottom? Or was the most important factor you think that the flame arrestor has now come up to temperature and is evaporating fuel very well? Because what's interesting is when you look at the washer, the flame kind of comes up around the edge of the washer, so you can definitely tell that the washer is doing a fantastic job of evaporating fuel, as much as the wick is doing pulling it up to the top. So it looks good. I don't think we've lost flame. What we could do is we can try turning it up a little bit more and see what happens here. See if we can maintain that. There's probably about an 1/8 inch of wick showing above the height of the flame arrestor here. I'd say an 1/8 inch in the center, and maybe ever so slightly a little more on the left and right as it crowns down and makes a dome. Well, it doesn't go out like a match, except at the first test. So, okay, we're going to wrap it up in a minute. We can go back to Sierra Nevada World Music Festival testing. I could definitely say I was able to duplicate the customer issue. We were able to also get the wick working. And we're a little baffled as to what was wrong in the first part and the steps we took that fixed it. And now we don't have a wick that is going out like a match anymore. So the wick has not been consumed. It's definitely charred. But still producing a flame. So we can try maybe too much being shown is what happened. Did he have something like this going on? Let's see what happens when we do that. So now I would say I easily have a 1/4 inch exposed. You know, it could have been maybe there was too much wick showing. And so there was a bunch of wick showing, and it all burned right down. Whereas, and now you can't even, whereas it was working fine before, very low, now you can't bring it down low anymore. Interesting. So these could have been the things the customer was experiencing, was that they had too much wick pulled out, it burnt down like a match. They tried to adjust the flame and it just went right out. Because I'll definitely tell you, messing with the flame height, with the wick height, has caused a negative experience. I don't think we have as good a flame going now with more wick showing. Which could be why there's a blues song called Keep Your Wicks Trimmed. So maybe it is key that you only have a little bit of wick showing, and anything more than that, and you're essentially creating this. So you see how much poorer the flame quality is with more wick showing. Well, we're always learning. What are we learning? A test tube with a washer works beautifully. So much better than a store-bought. Look at that. Look at this thing. We're having no issues at all. It's just a test tube with a washer and a wick pulled through. All right, well, what can we say? We're always learning. We're always doing tests. We're always authentic because we do everything live. So I'm definitely saying, what did I do to mess up the quality of the flame we had going? I had just the tiniest bit, less than an 1/8 inch of wick showing. I made the mistake of advancing it a bunch. Like that. We temporarily had a big, nice flame, which immediately died down. And now we're almost at the point where we've got to blow everything out, trim the wick back to flush, and start over again. So wick height is very, very important, it would appear, in this old-fashioned kerosene lantern. All right. Well, interesting. Yeah, it is really hard to say, except for that the wick height is very important, and having too much wick, which you think would be good, is not good. You need to have the wick pretty much flush with your flame arrestor. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. So what we'll do, I think we'll wrap up here. We'll say that a kerosene lantern is incredibly finicky, and a test tube with a washer and a wick is not finicky at all. And all you have to do is feed this fuel. Very interesting. So where are we at now? We're at the point where a test tube with a washer and a wick pulled through is working better than a professionally designed store-bought lamp. I'm completely baffled here. But you can see it right in front of you. We're having trouble with the flame here. So what had I done to mess up our good flame? I advanced it, pulling too much wick out, and then the flame instantly died down, and we can't get back to the point we'll have to trim the wick. Very interesting. So kerosene lantern is very finicky. A test tube with a washer is awesome. All right. Well, we're learning. We're learning here. We're learning that DIY lamps are very, very good. And for some reason, store-bought, it's just not working quite as well as my test tube. So we're going to put this out. We'll bring it down here, and I'll blow this out in a second. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm finding with my live streams that I need to let my voice trail off for a good 15, 20 seconds. Otherwise, it's just going to cut off abruptly. So I'm going to say thank you very much. In conclusion, we were able to duplicate the customer issues. And in closing, I would say the wick on a kerosene lantern needs to be absolutely flush, basically almost, with the flame arrestor. It probably helps to have the flame arrestor good, nice and hot. And having the fuel level up to the top of your reservoir is also would appear to be key. And a test tube with a washer is a better oil lamp than a store-bought one, apparently. I just can't even begin to wrap my head around this, how much better my test tube is working than... This design has had hundreds of years of work, and it should work flawlessly. But it's not. And a test tube with a washer with the same wick works so much better. Okay, so the lamp could have been part of the problem. It could be this is a very inexpensive kerosene lantern, and maybe these inexpensive kerosene lanterns that they sell at like Walmart don't work terribly well. It's hard to say why I'm having such better experience with a test tube and a washer. So that's just about out. We're going to go ahead and put that out completely. We'll see, we made quite a mess under here. Well, that makes me feel good that I was at least able to duplicate the experience the customer had. I was really kind of worried that we had a secondary issue, that maybe somebody had gotten paid to leave a bad review. But looking at this testing here, I was able to duplicate exactly what the customer had. And the only thing I could say that fixed it was I only had a tiny bit of wick showing. The flame arrestor was good and hot the second time around. And that made all the difference in the world of it not going out like a match. And lastly, I'm going to say that my test tube and a washer is just flawless. This is incredible. This thing has been working 2 separate tests. We haven't refilled it with fuel. I just dribbled a couple extra drops down to make sure it hadn't dried out between our last test a few days ago. So we'll wrap it up there. I'm a little bit baffled. If anybody is an expert on oil lamps and you can help explain to me what you think happened here, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much to all my customers, and I will get this video out to the customer to let them know I was able to duplicate their experience and what I think might help, being not very much wick showing, flat cotton wick, without very much wick showing. You potentially have to have a flame arrestor, which has been nice and warmed up, and you definitely need to fill the fuel to the top. That made a big difference too. Although we are now down to this level down here, we are more than halfway through a test tube worth of fuel in our highly improvised test tube washer lamp. Gosh, this is beautiful. Look at this thing. All right, everybody, have a good week, and we'll get back to our regularly scheduled Sierra Nevada broadcasts, and we're going to try to help promote the festival and make sure it sells out, and we have a lot of people there. So I plan on being at Sierra Nevada World Music Festival. You can play Where's Dano and find me walking around the festival, and I'll say hello. Thank you very much, everybody. We're going to let it have a few seconds of silence, because I find if I don't have a bunch of trailing silence at the end of my videos, the live streams cut off very abruptly. Thank you very much for tuning in.